Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam, Imam Rahman. How are you?
Walaikum
Alhamdulillah,
salam.
alhamdulillah. How are you? How are you, Dr. Darren?
Alhamdulillah, Imam. Great to see you.
MashaAllah, it's good to see both of you. Barakallah fikum. Inshallah, we will get started right away. Um, we were just trying to quickly finish up with our Salat al-Maghrib. So, inshallah, um, alhamdulillah, we are blessed to have our two distinguished um, members of the Greater Boston community, mashallah, Dr. Daren and Sheikh Dr. Imam Khalil Abdur Rashid. Both of you, Jazakallah khair, welcome to this program that we are putting together this evening. So inshallah, we'll start with maybe a little recitation, hopefully, inshallah, with the barakah of the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verses and the kalam Allah, the speech of God, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم نحن على ذلك من الشاهدين الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. I want all of us to take a moment and gather our thoughts and all of um, our intellectual together and to think about what's going on around us in this past few days, that what we have seen, the oppression against the Black community. And we have seen a lot and heard a lot. And I think this is the time for us, and especially I'm speaking for my own self, this is a time for us to listen. And I really want to take this opportunity for myself to learn from our two distinguished guests tonight, and to learn and to listen and to understand. And therefore, without any further ado, I just want to quickly introduce both of our guests. MashaAllah, both of them are someone who are well known to our community. We'll start, inshallah, with Dr. Daren. MashaAllah, he's one of our own community members, MashaAllah. He is the professor at Siemens University, and MashaAllah, one of his job and one of his expertise is educating educators and teaching teachers, inshallah. So hopefully that we can learn something, inshallah, tonight. And not just to learn and to take notes and to kind of also, inshallah, we'll have a Q&A towards the end. But I think it's something to take home as a practical solution for the difficulty and the crisis and the challenges that we see around us and that we are facing these days. So inshallah, without any further ado, Dr. Darren.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you all so much for this opportunity to speak in front of y'all. Once again, I think I say this all the time, like I speak in front of people a lot. It's part of my job, but I always get nervous when I speak to this community, and that's just a sign of how much respect I have for this community. And what an honor it is to be speaking before Sheikh Khalil, who's I'm going to try and get through my part, you know, as quickly as possible, because I know that Sheikh Khalil is going to really give us some really important insight. I've been listening to him talk over the last few weeks on these issues, and you know, I just can't wait to get to hear what he has to say. So I'm just going to jump right in, and I think I'm going to try and utilize technology today a little bit. I actually made a PowerPoint. Just because I wanted to try and make it as clear as possible for myself and for folks moving forward. So hopefully this will work, okay? And bear with me. So here we go. Bismillah. All right, and let me see if I can just do this the right way. Sorry. 1 second. Here we go. Bismillah. So I hope y'all can see this. And so I've given many talks to this community before, okay? And it's always, like I said, a pleasure to give talks to this community. And I think the talks clearly have not been enough, you know, okay, right? And I say that out of love, right? Any of us who have been on the famous or somewhat infamous, you know, WhatsApp list, you know, group for our community, has seen testimonials, you know, from Black members of our community, Black brothers and sisters, right, who have made it clear that there's still issues that we have to grapple with amongst ourselves in our own community, okay, right? And so that means that to the extent that we're serious about this work, it's going to take more than the semi-annual you know, talks or khutbas from Dr. Daren to really actualize this work, okay? And I want to be clear. I know that this community has been really serious about doing this work as well, and I've seen it, right? I've seen it from the time, you know, from the time I've been here. And we also know that our community has a really important, it's either we can see that as an opportunity and a test, right? Because we have such a unique thing going on in Sharon, because we really do have a really racially diverse group of folks who are a part of this community, and that's an opportunity and it's a test, right? Because that means that we have this real opportunity, because we always hear this, there's no racism in Islam, and I agree, but that doesn't mean that Muslims cannot be involved in racism, right? That it means that we just have an affirmative test to fight against it. It doesn't just mean that because there's no racism in Islam that we have nothing to deal with, right? It's like, you know, does that make sense? And so we have work to do. And I will say a few things. I think when I've given talks before, these are the three big lessons that, you know, that I usually have been giving when I've given talks about race and racism, you know, in our previous halakas. Whose shoulders are we standing on is one big topic, and I'll come back to each of these. Our children are learning more by what they see than what they hear, right? And that racism needs intentionality to be disrupted, okay? And what I'm gonna try and do is walk us through those few things, and then give some real concrete just suggestions about how we can be moving forward with action to actualize the learning. And then we'll pass it off to Sheikh Khalil, who's going to really, you know, make it, you know, clear for us. So let me see if I can move us forward. You know, let's see, whose shoulders are we standing on, right? And so we have as Muslims in America, right? Like the early vanguards of Islam, the early Muslims in our country were African Muslims who were enslaved, right, and brought to this country, right? And we have a picture here of Bilali Muhammadan, right, who was an enslaved man from Guinea who basically had a working knowledge of Arabic and memories of Islamic teachings, and did his very best, right, to hold on to these teachings and pass it on to the folks that he had under him. And this document, this Bilali document, actually, you can actually find it at the University of Georgia, and it's just an amazing. You have to understand that, like, Islam was not allowed to come over here in the United States. It was forcibly being taken away from folks, and anything that wasn't Christianity was being taken away. So this act of keeping, trying to keep this faith alive in the face of people who were actively trying to take away is a massive undertaking, right? And the notion that Islam is now here, no, it's now, we move forward hundreds of years and it's here. It's such a blessing from Allah, but it's on the backs, right, of folks who were trying to preserve that tradition under really dire conditions, right? And so we have to understand that Black Muslims, right, were in a lot of ways the first Muslims here in the United States, and so we're benefiting, yes, from the mercy of Allah and the work that these folks have done, and those shoulders that we're standing on. Okay, so that's just one way to think about it. In the Boston area, or in the United States in particular, for many, I know our community, I've talked about this before, our community, we have a lot of us are folks who immigrated here, right? And have a lot of opportunities, right? We're coming to the United States looking for opportunities, better schools, better jobs, right? Freedom, to worship the way we want to, right? That struggle has come on the back of many Black folks, right? Who fought for these rights, up until the point that then when many folks that are immigrating here could then take advantage of those rights, right? So those of us who moved, right? So then moving back to that last slide, for example, for those of us who moved to the United States because it's an economically prosperous nation, okay, right? It is, but where did that, how, right? Where did that prosperity come from? A cursory understanding of U.S. history helps you understand that it was on the back of African slaves, that, of all the cash crops that became the backbone, right, of the American economy, came from unpaid labor, right, on the backs of African folks. So for those of us who are just coming here because the United States is just a prosperous place, that came from somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. If those of us who came to Sharon, Massachusetts for the great school system, right, or a nice safe place to live, right? I've talked about this in previous clips, like, halakas, that Black folks were on the front lines of making sure that those spaces were available for folks to be able to live in, right? In the first place, I told the story of my step grandfather, my grandfather-in-law, who basically integrated the town of Schenectady, New York, but secretly, right? Because he had a white man buy the house for him, move in the darkness of the night, and then voila, now Schenectady's integrated, right? But it took sacrifice and hard work that a lot of us are now standing on to be able to move into suburban neighborhoods, to have safe places to live and great schools to go to, because as early as 40, 50 years ago, that just was not an option, right? Until many predominantly Black folks, took on that call. So we are these are other shoulders that we're standing on right now, okay? I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Another big topic that I talk about a lot when I do these clips is I'm also trained as a developmental psychologist, and I think a lot about how young folks learn, right? And to the extent that we're really leaning on young folks to be those agents of change for us, right? I've said this many times, young folks learn by what you do more than what you say. Okay, so we can do, and we know about this as a simple principle of our deen, right? There's what do the words that are coming off our tongues mean, right? If they're not backed up or they're not consonant with actions that reflect an understanding of those words, right? And so for young folks, even more so. So we can say all the right things, Black Lives Matter, this, that, whatever it is, treat people equally, don't judge people by the color, the color of their skin. We can say all those things, but if they see us doing contrary to that, and they see us doing that consistently in how we move through the world, that's going to be way more powerful, right? And so that really becomes an affirmative action for us to think about, not just saying things, but doing things, right? And so what do our young folks, what do all the folks around to see us doing in our family, in our everyday lives? How are we, which families do we socialize with? Which families are we allowing our children to think about getting married to? Which folks are they, socializing with on weekends or whatever, right? How are we organizing our weekend activities that might create opportunities for folks either to come together across difference or stay apart because of difference, right? What are they seeing in our communities, right? In our masajid, in our organizations? Who are the leaders? Who gets to say, who gets whose voices are heard, right? What kind of roles are people in? Does that make sense? They need to be seeing the ways in which we're living the words around equality and justice, as opposed to just us telling them that stuff, right? That's just not how it goes. So we have to think super hard. That puts a lot of responsibility on us individually and collectively to live Black Lives Matter, if that makes sense. Okay. The last big concept that usually comes up in my talks, right, is this notion of intentionality. Okay. This notion of like racism, and if we, the topic of this talk is about the structural aspects of racism, right? That means it's a system, and if it's a system, that means it just goes, right? And it's been going since we were, before we were here, and it might keep going after we're gone. And so, but the fact that that it's a system means that even if we sit here and we all have really good intentions, right? Just good intentions, and we all have good feelings, and we just want it to go away, it's not going to stop that way. Right, it's going to actually take someone taking that stick, shoving it into the workings of the machinery to make it stop. It's going to take something affirmative, right, and something that you're going to have to go do, rather than a pretty common sense notion, which is that if we just wait and wait and wait, like it's just going to get better, right? And we this notion that like things just get better as time goes on. There's something to that, but there's a way in which that makes these systems keep going quite seamlessly. So what does that mean to be intentional? It means we have to seek to consistently elevate the voices and the perspectives of folks who are rendered voiceless. Rather than, a pretty common thing is to say, look, we want to hear from everyone. This is open to everybody, right? Volunteer. It's, no restrictions, right? That's not enough, right? Because the folks who will feel, oppressed are not going to feel like, okay, this is a place for me, right? They're going to feel like, okay, like, I don't know, I've been socialized to, stay quiet, right? And so what ends up happening is the people who have been socialized to speak up, step up. Those who have been socialized to not, stay down. And then you just reproduce a system where the folks who are, have been in power are in power, and the folks who aren't. So what I'm saying is it's going to take, you have to like intentionally go set, and not wait for the crisis, by the way, not wait for like the crisis to happen, but be consistently seeking out the voices of folks we know, for whatever reasons, because we're all human, don't get their voices and perspectives elevated, and doing that consistently, so that you're forming authentic community with folks and relationships with folks, not just going to them when there is a problem, all right, or waiting for them to come to you when when there is a problem, right? We also, in terms of our Black communities in particular, we need to see those people and our communities through a strengths-based lens, right? Oftentimes when we talk about Black folks, it's, oh, the poor Black folks they've been victimized, and oh, poor them, and we just need to. It's like, no, Black folks, especially in the United States context, are a picture of like strength and resilience. Like, even if you're going to think about the folks who came here by the virtue of of enslavement from Africa. The folks had to survive getting captured in Africa. They had to survive the Middle Passage, and they survived everything after that. These are strong people, and all these things that we love about Black people and that we love about Black culture, right, is in the face of being denied all the opportunities to do that well in the first place. So all the things that we love about Black people are Black people doing things when nothing is lined up for them to do it in the first place. So we are people of strength. So when I urge us to start to think about the history of Black folks and thinking about that, it's not through the lens of poor Black folks. It's through the lens of look at the beautiful things that folks have created in the face of being denied access and denied resources. So it's a strength based. And the last thing I'll say about this is it's going to, it's going to require, courage. Like, racism keeps going so easily because it's easy to not disrupt it. It's easier to not disrupt it. It's easier to not say something. It's easier to just pretend we didn't hear that. It's easier to look away, right? And so it's going to involve acts of individual and collective courage and acting on principles. And we've talked about this, and I'm sure Sheikh Khalil will bring this up too. We have principles in our deen that give us an affirmative, responsibility to do that anyway, right? As believers. So I want to just give 3 suggestions moving forward, like on a sort of an individual level, a family level, and then like a masjid level, okay? And then I'll gladly pass it off. So on an individual level, in terms of moving forward, I'm urging folks who don't know who don't know enough about the history and the context of Black folks to learn, right? We're something that I know a lot of Black folks these days are kind of tired of are the following: well-intentioned folks like who are trying to learn more, coming to us and going, please, how can I learn more about this, right? It's a good question, and I think it's coming from a good place, but it also, you can understand how it's hard for Black folks who are, on the business end of racism, getting asked by, other folks to be like, well, how do we stop this, right? It's not really our job as Black folks to stop racism, if that makes sense, okay? But look, so all I have to say is that, it can reify racism if like people are just like, well, leaning on Black folks to then teach them how to like stop oppressing them, okay? So all that to say is that we want you to learn, but and you can definitely ask for help, but make some initial honest attempts to learn yourself moving forward, right? And then move from there, right? And mashallah, we have a really smart community, right? And so I know a lot of people just sort of say, well, how would I ever learn it? Like, we have folks in this community who will go on, Google or YouTube and learn how to like fix a computer or a crashed website or whatever, right? So I'm sure we can figure this out. I've given 2 just small resources here. I've given this one before. The 1619 project from the New York Times Magazine is a wonderful resource. It's interactive, even has a podcast, and it does an amazing job of both talking, sort of showing of like the history of the ways that Black folks have been treated and were resilient in the face of that treatment, and drawing some straight lines to how we see how things are, we're experiencing some of the social context that we're experiencing today, okay? Another great book and Zora Hurston is just a wonderful resource as an author and as an anthropologist. One of her more recent books is called Barracoon, which is an amazing account of her interviewing a man who was at the time remembered his life pre-enslavement, remembered the Middle Passage, remembered being enslaved, and remembered life after enslavement. So it's just a wonderful, what I love about this historical perspective is like that Black people's histories, especially in the United States, don't start at slavery, right? That's another way in which we start a deficit model of looking at Black folks is like, they started as slaves, right? And there's a difference between calling Black people slaves or calling them enslaved, right? Some of that's about language too, right? It's not like the core of our being that we were slaves, is that we were enslaved, right? But so those are just 2 places to start, to think about some of the historical perspectives of, where Black folks, how they came to this context and where we are now. I think as a family, what will be really important, this gets to some of the principles I was talking about before, is as families support Black businesses, right? Figure out the restaurants, figure out the different businesses or organizations that are run by Black folks. Again, like this was just me doing a quick Google search, right? This community is smart enough to like, I know there are going to be all these questions. Brother Darren, like, what are these? Like, I'm going to do the same thing you're going to do. I'm going to start Googling. I mean, some of these, yes, I know, but some of this is like doing the work. And so, do some work to go support Black businesses. And that has the impact of both showing your family, right? Like giving your family exposure to folks in a variety of roles and showing them that, Black people are business owners and people who, run things, right? Not just the people who clean things up in those places, right? Or cook in those places. And it's a form of economic justice. One of the things I was just saying earlier is that one of the biggest injustices that Black people have faced is that they have not reaped the benefits of all this American economic prosperity that happened on our back. So one small thing we can do is at least start supporting the communities that are out there trying to, do good business. Last thing I'm gonna just, and this is just suggestions for our community. Okay, this is just suggestions for our community moving forward. I ain't nobody. I'm just here to just, make some suggestions. I think we need to create a position or a committee that focuses on intra-faith relations, right? We have, what we do. We have the interfaith, folks, right? And it's important, and and we have to, right? And we roll out the red carpet for our interfaith brothers and sisters, and we do all this amazing stuff, right? And it stands in such stark contrast. If you read some of the comments we saw in the WhatsApp group, it stands in stark contrast to the brothers and sisters who deserve that treatment the most from us, right? Our own brothers and sisters, right? And so it speaks to the notion of us having a dedicated and continuous way to be thinking about how to elevate those voices and perspectives of the different constituencies within our community. Alhamdulillah, I know we have a WhatsApp group that's focused on our convert community. That's like the type of step we're trying to do, to like seek out, figure out what communities are there that have needs and work together with them to cultivate, an authentic relationship. Last thing I'll say is we do lots of fundraisers, right? And of course we have to fundraise for our own masajid and our own programs, of course. But another thing that we really need to be doing is fundraising for causes that impact Black lives, right? And so we need to be known, in the Black Muslim or non-Black Muslim, right? Communities as folks who show up financially or otherwise, right, for these causes. And so when the crises, especially when there isn't a crisis, right? And so when these crises do come, they know, our communities will know that our Muslim brothers and sisters are, genuinely have been and continue to be here for us in substantive ways beyond just, a message from, that says Black Lives Matter. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm hoping that those three types of suggestions will be useful for us individually and collectively moving forward. I'll end it there. Anything that was good for me came from Allah. Anything that was bad for me was from me. So I ask forgiveness for that. And Jazakallah khair for this opportunity. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah. Very interesting points that you brought up, mashallah, for our community. And mashallah, because you know our community very well, and you've always been here and always been very useful to have you speak to us, mashallah. Great points, inshallah. I really like those points, and it's something that we have to think about it and try to implement some of it. And for those who are who just joined us, we're trying to put that interfaith kind of committee together, and perhaps do some other educational programs, like doing a workshop. There were some suggestions that came in. Inshallah, Brother Zaki and others are going to be leading that. So anyone who would like to join in, whoever wants to join into that group and to help out and facilitate, inshallah, you're welcome to join that group, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.